Welcome friends for tips and tricks for research writing. So this is lecture series number 4. The previous 3 lecture series were on literature search, PICO. The second was on referencing and citation. And third was on titles, keywords, legends for table and figures. So to access those lecture series, you can also go on my previous YouTube on these topics. So this lecture series is how to write subsections and how you can avoid plagiarism while doing a research writing. So before I begin, my gratitude to my guide for my master's and for my PhD to my esteemed teachers. Why learn research writing? As you all know, academic writing is a serious and deliberate endeavor, and that keeping that in mind, I would like to quote here this by Albertson. Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. So your research may be having what already has been looked at, but in your research, what your responsibility is to bring out the thoughts which nobody else would have thought. So if you don't write, nothing will change. But without publication, all research is sterile, is very well said by Professor Peter Clayton-Jones. So keeping that in mind, let's begin with this, with the intended learning objectives being first, strategies for bridging the gap between research writing, to understand common elements, tips for drafting and revising individual sections, and then understanding what is plagiarism and which shall maintain your publication ethics and academic integrity. So let's start. How to write key sections of your research. So format for research is, most of you are aware of, it is IMRD format, which is introduction, materials and methods, results, and discussion. So IMRD is the mnemonic for format for research. Now, often we come to feel that there is a lot of burden and we are not able to balance. So this lecture talks about balancing this burden and coming up triumph. So let's start. The general advice with which I would like to start is establish a writing schedule. Begin by free writing. Keep a small notebook with you to write down relevant thoughts. Save parts of your writing into a recording device, because it's much easier nowadays with the help of artificial intelligence and smartphones. So whatever comes in your mind, you can start writing or recording that. And many times you can use your Google keyboard, which can voice type your recording. Compose different parts in different Word document files. This will help you in the long run. Start with more clear-cut sections first. So your methodology, you have already decided when you submitted your research proposal. So that will help you to give you a good start. Now let's see the quick tips for writing a good research. Start by writing sections, proposed project. Demonstrate an up-to-date knowledge of your field. Avoid jargon. Say what you mean in clear, simple language. Don't be afraid to state the obvious. Ask a colleague to review your manuscript and be enthusiastic about your idea. If you don't sound interested, why should anyone else be? So be enthusiastic. Listen to your guides. Accept that a variety of feedback and rewrites are part of this process. So sooner you accept, the happier you are. Let us come to section 1, which is introduction. So mostly introduction in research writing consists of aim and objectives and review of literature. Now when you are writing an introduction or background, the deficiencies model of an introduction is a general template for writing a good introduction that consists of 5 parts. So let's see what are these 5 parts. The first one being the research problem. Second is studies that have addressed the problem. Third is deficiencies in those studies who try to address those problems. And the fourth is the significance of the study for particular audiences. And fifth being the purpose statement, which is actually the aim of your research work. Now coming to objectives, objectives should be specific, to the point, and achievable. It should give a clear notion of what is to be described, determined, identified, compared, or confirmed. So these terms can be your starting terms for your objectives. Should be appropriately worded, should be in a proper sequence. The sequence according to which you will be collecting the data, or you will be using that in your methodology. Act like a salesperson and convince the reviewers. So your writing should be so sharp and clear. Literature review allows you to understand how other scholars have written about your topic. The range of theories used to analyze materials or data, how other scholars connect their specific research topics to larger issues, questions, or practices within the field. The best methodologies and research techniques for your particular topic you will come to know from various literature review. Now let's go to section 2, which is methods. This section has multiple parts and detailed enough so that the reviewers could conduct the study. So the basic thing which you have to keep in mind is your methodology should be so crystal clear that if anyone else wants to perform that study, should be able to do that. So the first part would be study design, which should consist place of study, source of data, related approvals, and sample description. So this part usually describes all these 5 components, and then comes your selection criteria, which should have inclusion as well as exclusion criteria. So your study design consists of these subsections. Next is ethical issues. So you have to mention the ethical clearance which was obtained by the Institutional Ethical Committee or Review Board, informed consent were obtained or not, and participation information sheet in the language for the person according to their local language or mother tongue. Third section is materials or equipments for the study. And fourth section, subsection of method, is methodology. The methodology which you are going to use to obtain your data, or if it is an experimental study, how you're going to conduct that experiment. The fifth section is pro forma for data collection, which should be planned in such a way that when it should be numbered so that you can transfer this data into the Excel sheet. Statistical methods should be discussed with the statistician beforehand and should be mentioned very clearly the purpose of your inferential statistics as well. Now let's start with methods. With important component which I would like to share with you all is sample determination or sample size calculation. So sample description should be done in this manner, where you can refer a study based on which your sample size was determined and at what power this will be applied. So the sample calculation formula should be mentioned, and based on that you can use this. So this is another example of sample description which you can use based on the previous research work, which is your key article of your research, and based on that your sample size can be determined. Now let us move to the quick tips for methodology. Introduce the overall methodological approach. Describe the specific methods of data collection. If necessary, provide background and rationale for unfamiliar methodologies. Explain how you analyze and interpret your results, that is statistical analysis and theoretical framework. Describe your analysis plan. What statistical test will you use? And be sure your statistics are appropriate for your study design. So you can refer previously published articles on similar research question and what statistical analysis and what type of data you are collecting and which statistical test is appropriate for that type of data. Address potential limitations mentioned in previous literature. Whereas for section 3 and 4, the results and discussion. Now, usual discussion is benefits of the study. So follow the sequence of aim and objective and methodology in your discussion. So in results, it is mostly what you have found. So the statistical output, your descriptive output, and your inferential output should be very well planned in form of tables and graphs. Whereas in discussion, you should mention about benefits of the study and compare it with previous published work or literature available, which you should follow the sequence of your objective and methodology. Other components are conflict of interest, sponsors for the study, if any, and references. So all these things should be very clearly mentioned in your discussion part. Now let's go to quick tips for results and observation. There should be an introductory remark. You cannot start directly with the table or graph. Objective-wise elaboration of the data should be done. Recording the data, which means it should be able to be explained in the form of tables, charts, and photographs, which should come in an order of objectives. Establishing correlationships. So whatever was the cause and effect of which you have factors which you were trying to study, the variables in your study should have some correlationship, and that should be talked about. Quantitative and qualitative representation of data should be done. Comparative analysis, if applicable, should be done, which will form an inferential statistics and description. If any formula are derived from data, then validation of the same should be done. Effect of the variables on data acquired in the problem under consideration should be mentioned in results. Now coming to discussion and interpretation of data, introduction to problem under consideration should be given before you start objective-wise discussion. Justify materials and methodology which you have used if it is not the standard one or you have used certain new methodologies. Objective-wise comparison of your results with other studies with reasons for similar or dissimilar results should be mentioned. Justify each result, whether it is increased, decreased, or having any difference. Concluding each objective result, so you should give your conclusive remark based on your statistical test. So in short, you should mention the clinical significance of the objective which you have searched in your study. Clinical significance of the results of the research project should be mentioned in a nutshell, and then limitations of the study, so that the reader knows that what were the limitations or the gaps which were there in the study. Suggestion for future course of action, like for statistical, technical, or procedural steps, which can be given for the readers. Now let's come to summary and conclusions. Brief outline of the project undertaken, list of positive conclusions, list of negative conclusions forms the part of your summary and conclusion. Now, what is conflict of interest? Many people, they get confused for it. It is imperative that the investigators should not have any financial or other interest that undermine scientific integrity while recording and reporting their data. So many times, many companies, they fund your research. So any research or other links of the investigators with industry are usually discouraged. And if it was there, the researcher should mention it very clearly. It may lead to loss of public faith on the credibility of data being reported, for example, in drug and other clinical trials. The next section is bibliography and appendices. Include a working bibliography of key text that informs about your study and methodology. Your appendices may include experiment diagrams, permissions for human subject testing, etc. In references, provide appropriate references from recently published journals or literature supporting the proposed research. Now, annexures, this is the list which you can have as annexures: copy of ethical committee approval, participant information sheet, informed consent form, pro forma for collecting data, copy of study completion certificate, and always attach copy of plagiarism report, and then copy of permission letters as applicable to your study. For example, if you have conducted a community study for prevalence or a study in some institute or in a school, then copy of permission letters should be attached. So now, with ending with the subsections, I would like to mention certain cements and bonds which will result in continuity or will give new aspect to your manuscript writing. The first one being style considerations. In academic research writing, the tone of your language is very important. So when conveying your attitude in your writing, try to strike a consistently confident tone. Avoid an apologetic or arrogant tone in your writing. Then there should be coherence in your writing. Move from old information to new information. Put the most important information at the end of the sentence, which is considered as stress position. Start sentences with short, easily understood phrases. Very long sentences are not considered favorable. The third point is your voice. There are two types of voice, active and passive. What is active? I will conduct the bulk of the research during the 6-month fieldwork period. Whereas passive is the bulk of the research will be conducted during fieldwork. So you can understand that active uses I, we, whereas in passive, such type of terms are avoided. So another aspect is the tense, that is passive. So this is a table which shows how you can convert your active voice into a passive one. So reasons to use passive voice is your field prefers its use, especially in describing research design and experimental activities. You need to preserve coherence from sentence to sentence, and when we use passive voice, it also helps in maintaining that coherence. Visual aids is another aspect. Incorporate charts, graphs, illustrations wherever possible, permissible or practical. Reasons to use visual aids is your field prefers its use, especially in describing research methods and results. So now with this, let us now move to understand what is plagiarism. Now, before I go to plagiarism, the important thing to understand is intellectual property. All new intellectual property, namely patents, designs, etc., are generated as part of the research. But let's understand plagiarism. Passing off of another's work as one's own is considered as plagiarism, or in another way, it can be said duplicating one's own previous work without reference to prior publication is self-plagiarism. So this is a definition of plagiarism given in most of the dictionaries, which you all can refer. And copyright is something which talks about the rights given by legal authorities which protects the expression of an idea and not the idea itself. Copyright protects original works of authorship fixed in any tangible medium of expression, now known or later developed, from which they can be perceived, reproduced, or otherwise communicated either directly or with the aid of a machine or device. So, where copyright or infringement or plagiarism can happen? It can happen in dissertation writing, manuscript preparation, exams, and project and assignments. So the researcher must have a thorough understanding of the publication ethics and copyright laws. And if we fail, we are entering into copyright infringement. Copyright infringement is possible if an author reuses portions of a previously published work. So, if you do that, there is a consequence. So, let's see what are the consequences of plagiarism. So, here I would like to share that you should be cautioned that the number of printed journals and everything is expanding, and it is now very easy to cut and paste and download and plagiarize the information, as the papers are freely available on website, and it is very easy to download and copy that text. So if you do that, it's plagiarism. So don't do it and be cautious. How plagiarism is detected? There are various softwares, but the most important is reviewers or readers familiar with the field and the author's work will very easily find out. Abrupt changes of style within the manuscript will clearly indicate copy, cut, copy, paste. Routine screening with internet search engines also helps in finding or diagnosing that. And now we have plagiarism detection software. UGC promotes Urkund, whereas most of the international journals, they either go with Turnitin or Authenticate plagiarism detection softwares. COPE is a committee on publication ethics which has cited the recent cases related to plagiarism, where image, co-author fails to respond, online posting of confidential draft, identifying patient information, misattributed authorship, and unauthorized use of data are various types of complaints which are being received in recent time. So you have an important challenge in front of you. Copyright violation and plagiarism has led to blurring of the facts and created dilemmas amongst researchers and writers. So the standard protocol and procedures for writing a biomedical manuscript need to be made evident. To understand publication ethics and to eradicate the threat of plagiarism in order to protect ourselves from copyright infringement. So let's see what is the difference between plagiarism and copyright infringement. Plagiarism is reuse of ideas, concepts, structure, data, taking credit for others' work. An author of original work may seek retraction or erratum in this situation. Whereas no infringement unless exact words, figures, or images are replicated. Maybe exceptions like fair dealing or fair use, where you are criticizing someone's work or reviewing someone's published work. Legal right of copyright owner to claim for financial damages always is the right of the author. So what action can happen in case of plagiarism? If it's a clear plagiarism, retraction, information of author's employer can be taken up. Whereas minor plagiarism is detected, then you require correction or citation of sources, and you can publish with correction. So this is a small table which is very self-explanatory, that plagiarism and copyright, how it goes. So extensively quoting from a work, if it is more than 10%, but it is with permission and with attribution, you are not violating the copyright. If without permission and without attribution, it is both copyright infringement and plagiarism. Without permission but with attribution, then it is copyright infringement only. With permission and without attribution is considered as plagiarism only. So keep this in mind. Try to keep it below 10%, which has been advocated by UGC, and follow this. So with permission, with attribution is the key. You're not violating either plagiarism or copyright infringement. So let's just quickly see do's and don'ts to avoid plagiarism. Reuse of materials, experimental results, etc. is acceptable only upon explicit cross-referencing of the publication where they were reported previously. What is not allowed is resell or reproduce any part of it for commercial purposes. Post the publisher's PDF version of the article online. Do's and don'ts for authors: do not submit the same manuscript to more than one journal. If you wish to submit a paper that is under consideration at one journal to another journal, get written consent from your co-authors. Write to the first journal editor about this, asking that the paper be withdrawn. Get a formal notification from the first journal editor that has been withdrawn from consideration. Preserve this notification and present it to the second journal at the time of submission. If you have written two related papers and wish to submit them to two different journals, disclose the details of each paper to both journals. Inform the editors that you have a similar paper under review at another journal. Even if these papers are written in different languages, you are supposed to inform. Enclose copies of these papers along with your submission for ready reference. Now let us see what is public domain, which will help you to understand the difference between infringement or understand what is fair use. So let's know public domain and fair use. The most information is protected by copyright. So here you can see publication of US government, copyright has been waived by the author, and works on which the copyright has expired, like works by William Shakespeare. So these are the things which are now in public domain. So the only thing you don't have to cite is common knowledge, something that everyone knows, like who the president is. Now let's see what is fair use. Fair use is the ability to use sources without seeking permission from the copyright holder. So the four factors determining fair use and some indicators that a use is fair. So the first factor is the purpose and character of the use. Second is nature of the copyrighted work. Third, the portion of the work used. And fourth is the effect of the use on the potential market. So these are the four areas which you should understand for determining fair use. Now, fair use allows you to quote passages from a book or a journal article as long as it is credited or cited. Reproduce short segments of songs and movies as long as it is credited to the author. Use an entire work depending on the circumstances or take permissions. Examples are professor giving you a copy of an article for reading purpose, photocopying selection of materials for your own reading use, and library electronic reserves. Now, can we eradicate plagiarism? It is unlikely that we will ever be able to eradicate plagiarism altogether. However, we seek to minimize the risk by ensuring that authors know we will deal promptly with every case brought to the attention. So let's see citing sources as social practice. It's the same thing we do on Facebook or in messengers with sending links, but in professional and academic work, we call it citing. So many codes have these. For example, if I'm sharing this quote, then I should mention the source and the website from which I have taken. And many times nowadays, students are being summoned for mentioning the articles, but not, or taking the content from one article and not mentioning the sources. So this is what you're supposed to follow. So now let's learn to paraphrase. How you can avoid this is by paraphrasing. The original passage is followed by its use in 3 student papers here, Abby, Brian and Chad, and you will see they have been given this task of paraphrasing. So this is the original passage, this is the reference given below, and they have been asked to do paraphrasing. So this is what Abby has written. What do you think? Is it appropriate? No, it's a thumbs down. This is plagiarism in its worst form. Abby does not indicate that the words and ideas belong to the boostin, leaving her readers to believe the words are hers. She has stolen the words and ideas, attempted to cover the theft by changing or omitting occasional words. So it's a thumbs down and it is plagiarism. Let's see what Brian has done. He has mentioned the author's name, stating that Boostin argues, and he has changed certain terminologies. But still, it's a thumbs down. Even though Brian acknowledges his source, this is plagiarism. Why? He has copied the original almost word for word. He has not supplied quotation marks to indicate the extent of his borrowing. Now let's see what Chad has done. He has used quotations. He has given the number as well at the end. So it's a thumbs up. Chad has done a good job. He identified his source at the beginning of the paragraph, letting readers know who is being quoted. He provided a footnote directing them to the exact source of the statement. And he has paraphrased some of Boostin's words and quoted others which were taken as such. So makes it clear to the reader which words are his and which belong to Boostin. So this is what you have to do while you take something from someone else's research work. So message for student is, many students, they forget citation and then they can't remember where they got their sources. So this I have already dealt in referencing, that is first lecture series, that please keep recording the reference or the citation in a separate document and write the author, surname and year so that it is easily sourceable. So with this, I would like to also show you a free online paraphrasing tools which are available. What you have to do, just Google free paraphrasing tool. But I have to state this, that use it judiciously. See, again, it is a computer which is doing it for you, but whether the rewording or paraphrasing is making a scientific meaning has to be judged by you. So what you have to go through is, these are the few paraphrasing tools which I would recommend: rewrite tool, dupli checker, paraphrasing tool, and quillboard. So this is the rewrite tool. This is how the panel appears, their window appears, the text before. Once you start, you will get the text after paraphrasing. This is in Dupli Checker, where you get following things. You have to choose a file. You can upload your Word document and then you can start your search. So let's try paraphrasing the introduction of a published article. So here I've taken the introduction and I'm giving you the example in Quillbolt. So when I paste it, and I've chosen, it gives various modes: standard, fluency, creative. So most best mode would be standard for scientific writing. So once I paste it, and here there is quilling button, so you have to quill it, and on this side right hand you will get the paraphrased sentences. Here you can go letter by letter, sentence by sentence, and if you think you need to change or you want to rewrite, you can rewrite here itself, and then you can copy this and paste it in your original document. So I would like to share here, my favorite is Quillbolt for paraphrasing. So some simple tips to avoid plagiarism: attribute references, describe all sources of information, give acknowledgements, provide footnotes, use quotation marks wherever required. If you think more than 3 words were used from someone's article, and paraphrase the original, attribute the work. So some simple tips: extensive quotation, obtain permission from the publisher of the original work. Avoid self-plagiarism by taking permission from the publisher of previous article which you have authored if their permissions are required. Obtain permission for use of published drawings or other illustrations if you consider they are important for making the readers understand your research work. So again, I would like to say, caution, watch your step and proceed carefully. So there has been increase in infringement cases which are being filed, and maybe one of us may fall into that. So be cautious. Now let us just recapitulate the tips and tricks for research writing of this lecture series where I have shared with you the general advice, quick tips for writing a good research. Listen to your guide. I would repeat: writing an introduction, quick tips for methodology, tips for results and observations, tips for discussion, understanding plagiarism, do's and don'ts to avoid plagiarism, understanding public domain and fair use, and learning to paraphrase, and then some simple tips to avoid plagiarism. So thank you, friends. Here is my email ID. For any queries, you can mail me on this. Thank you so much for being part of this journey and learning. So I believe learning continues and hope to share more with you all in future as well. Thank you.